to our first Conversations with the Editor session here at the virtual Propane Expo. I'm Brian Richesson, editor of LPGas magazine. I'd also like to thank the virtual Propane Expo for the opportunity here to visit with members of the industry. And we thought it was only fitting for this first session to bring in an editor for our conversation. Pat Hyland spent 15 years as the editor of LPGas magazine. I was fortunate to work with under Pat for 5 of those years, and I consider him to be a mentor. But in 2012, Pat had an opportunity to go work for the Propane Education and Research Council, where he now serves as the Director of Industry Communications. He also serves as a member of our LPGas Editorial Advisory Board. Welcome on in, Pat.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you having me.
No problem. Very honored to do it. Maybe just rewinding a little bit here, Pat, looking, when you came into the propane industry, you were a journalist and a newspaper man at that time. What was your first impression of the propane industry at that time?
Sure. Well, I didn't really know exactly what it would be like. As you know, in the newspaper profession, you get exposed to so many different kinds of people and businesses. And so I really didn't know how this would fit, what the propane industry would be like, whether I'd like it, whether it would work for me. But one of the things that jumped out right away was, these are people that are very straightforward, very much what you see is what you get with them. There are very few ivory towers in this industry, which really appeals to me. I like these people. When you talk to them, they say what they mean what they say. And I try to be the same way with them. And I think that's important. And that's something that energizes me going forward. I trust people at their word, and, that enables conversations to be productive going forward.
How was that transition then? Spent 15 years with LPGas, and what was that transition like over to PERC in 2012? And, at that time, what was your mindset as far as, what kind of an impact you wanted to make at PERC?
Sure. Well, I was fortunate. I was very familiar with PERC as an organization and the individuals on the staff, because we had been covering PERC since its formation 25 years ago, right? The inception was there. So I had covered it. I knew the people, I knew the issues, I knew the organization pretty well. So that made it pretty simple for me. Now, what I didn't know was the operations, how they do things, the organization itself. It's a bigger organization, 32 employees versus, at the magazine, it was basically you and me on the editorial side alone. And so that was a little bit different.
Right.
But all along, certainly I recognized the importance of the organization. How it invests the industry's dollars into all aspects of the industry that eventually is being done to expand the uses and the users of propane as a clean, reliable energy source. We very much recognize that at the end of the day, no matter what we do at PERC, we don't sell a gallon of propane. And all that heavy lifting gets done on the front lines by the propane marketers. We try to help them, we try to guide them, we try to get them more information, more resources to do that and do that successfully. But you never forget the fact that you're doing it for them, because they're the ones that really do the hard work. And then the second part of your question, I don't go into it trying to make an impact. I think and I hope that I bring some communication skills. And when I say that, it's both articulating, writing, and talking as a journalist, and listening skills, and a sense of trust to help try to solve some of the challenges and leverage some of the opportunities that are before us to advance the industry as a whole. So it's really pretty simple. It's nothing loftier than that.
You spent a good deal of your time as a journalist, telling stories. I learned a lot from you from a journalism aspect of things. Do you miss journalism, being a journalist, in telling those stories, or have you found other ways to tell stories just maybe from a different perspective, a different way at PERC?
Yeah, well, I think I'll probably always be a journalist at heart. That's what I'm trained to do. I did journalism work for many years beyond my 15 at LPGas magazine, several newspapers, and other publications. So I think that's always rooted there. I'm probably a journalist trying to fit into a non-journalist role, and more accurately. But the fact of the matter is I still do a fair amount of writing and editing for Perk, and I like that. And again, I think I'm pretty good at that, and that's a contribution I make to that team. I know I certainly drive my colleagues crazy with any and all punctuation, spelling, and grammar outbursts
Oh
that
yeah,
you were well exposed to over the years.
for sure.
Then I guess the other part of that is, I've traveled to 47 states in my 9 years here at Perk, and that travel is all about getting to meet with the industry professionals face to face, in presentations, whatever, at trade shows, state association meetings, our own advisory committee meetings and council meetings, and that's all about keeping the conversation alive, the back and forth, because it takes a full conversation, an ongoing conversation, to work your way through some of the complex issues that we have and challenges, and identify opportunities and figure out what's the best way we can all pull at the same time in the same direction to make it work. So I don't have to tell you, you know all too well, Brian, I'm rarely at a loss for words. So
Can you maybe expand on that a little bit as far as, what your main role is at Perk as far as director of industry communications? What does that mean? Can you explain that a little bit more for us?
yeah, I'm part of a communications team, so the titles don't necessarily mean something very restrictive, that you do this, you don't do that. So I think of my role as having several pieces, all of which tie together. Overall, I think I'd say that, I help the team develop integrated programs of marketing and outreach and training services, all of those things that are designed to help marketers convert raw information, intelligence, analysis, data gathering, all those things that we do as an organization in their behalf, into something that they can use at the frontline level, right? So that's kind of the umbrella. And then, underneath that, or within that, I think my role is to serve as a facilitator, right? So I see myself as being charged with connecting the dots, basically, try to link all of the Perk services and resources that we spend a lot of time and in the industry's money to put together, match them up to the needs and the opportunities of the marketers in the field, right? So being a facilitator, part of that, as we mentioned before, is about building strong relationships with the propane professionals in the organizations, to raise awareness and understanding of what Perk's strategic goals and programs and resources are. This is what we're doing. This is where we're going and why. And then lastly, I think the part of that is probably the part we don't talk a lot about, but is probably the most important. And that is you got to listen, right? So in my role, I try to ensure that whatever the industry's needs and interests and concerns, I guess, to make sure those are communicated back up to the Perk staff, to inform them in their business planning and programs and strategy, to make sure that all of that is in alignment. Because at the end of the day, if it's not in alignment, we're wasting a lot of time. We're spinning our wheels, because it's not going to be effectively accepted in the industry.
Yeah, maybe as a follow-up then, what are you hearing? What are some of those concerns from the propane market or from the industry that you're hearing in your communications with the states?
Well, I think the hot topics these days are probably twofold. Number one, the industry realized very drastically a couple of years ago that we're having a hard time finding, recruiting, and keeping employees these days, as are a lot of industries, and especially even in pre-COVID, that was the case. So, we had never really made a concentrated effort to address that. Let's face it, our industry is an older group of employees. LPGas studies have documented that. There's a lot of knowledge and experience expiring as those people step out of the workforce. We need to aggressively restock those shelves. And The marketers were saying that loud and clear in our surveys to them, that that's not only true, but it's a high priority for them. Then I guess the second one is all of this electrify everything that we're wrestling with. It started as just a West Coast thing and then a New England thing, but everybody's seeing it now. All of this pressure to decarbonize and save the environment and all of those legitimate concerns are leading to some what we think are pretty illegitimate outcomes, gas bans in local communities and all of those kinds of things that just really don't make sense. So I think those two things are pretty threatening to most of the propane marketers, and we're trying to address those with resources and strategies that align with those concerns.
Yeah, it seems like, it's really important to track what's going on, within the states, different environment across the country. And you said, you've been to 47 states, and you stay in close contact with the industry in those states. What have you learned about the industry in your position, and how different is the industry in each of these states?
Well, I knew this coming into this job, certainly. At the magazine, it was a lot about answering questions that help our readers learn what's going on and why it's happening, right? And when you go on the road and talk to folks firsthand, I think one of the things that I've learned is there's also an equal need for the industry to know how. Well, how do I do that? I hear what you're saying. The data says this, and there's an opportunity to do this, but back at Hyland Propane in Cleveland, Ohio, I have no idea how to make that part of my everyday operations work. How do I do that? So that was kind of an insight that helped us realize we have to do more on the how. And a lot of that comes down to training. So there are lots of new training opportunities to teach that. I've always known, I was told from day one size almost never fits all in this industry. And I think that's been a truism from day one. And that's pretty self-evident in the fact that, there's some very drastic differences in market opportunities, in competitive challenges, in the aggression of the legislators and regulators in some states and regions versus others. And of course, fundamentally in the weather. And since weather drives so much of our industry's business, that's a reflection that everybody doesn't wear the same hat to meet those challenges. So I think that's the reality. I don't think that will ever change for us as an industry. And it adds significant challenge in most everything that we at PERC try to do in behalf of the industry as a whole.
You mentioned the training, the education. Can you explain a little bit about what PERC offers, maybe from a program standpoint? Where is a lot of that time being spent right now as far as offerings to the industry?
Sure. Always stuff in the pipeline and, bubbling up to the surface. But, I think some of the notable developments currently in the works we are just in the process now getting ready to launch a new brand campaign for the industry. That'll start in the second half of 2021. We've been using the current brand, Clean American Energy, since 2012. That's a long time, and some of the research says that what's important to the end use consumer in their decision making to buy propane no longer aligns with what they said back then. And so we're trying to align our messaging with what their new concerns are, many of which circle around those same environmental issues that we were talking about earlier. So we're working on that. We also talked about workforce development programs to try to find new employees, promote the industry in a way that we've never had to do before. And I'm talking about promotion as in marketing. And then when we get them in, how do we get them trained? How do we get them trained faster, better, get them on the job in a way that's a bit more efficient to meet some of the urgency that we have? We've got a new environmental messaging partnership program that council just approved at its April meeting. That's going to put $2 million into a matching program with the state associations. For every dollar that they want to spend of their rebate dollars, PERC will match with two, and that's to get this new environmental messaging out there through paid media programs. So that's brand new. That's gonna start this summer as well. We talked about training. Lots of new training has been created and continues to be created now that we have a new learning center, our learning management system on propane.com. There's already 400 plus pieces of education and training on there, and that's growing every single day. And then I guess the last thing is, as you know from the world of marketing, things are very different today than they were even in 5 years ago, right? 10 years ago, how you marketed. You can't just buy a billboard. You can't just have a yellow page ad. All those things that for generations of this industry were adequate are simply not anymore. And so we got to help folks realize that, get better at that, give them some resources to facilitate that. So we do what we call the Can Do Conference to try to get marketing focused for the industry who's ready to step up and be better at marketing their individual companies as well as propane itself.
Yeah, just, talking about the resources, the materials that PERC offers, and, just covering PERC over the years. I know there's so much that they put out there for the marketers, to help their businesses. What are some of you did mention what are some of the best helpful resources out there for marketers, and, where can they go to check that out and to maybe implement them in their businesses?
Yeah, well, it's one of our challenges, right? Our scope of work at PERC is very broad, trying to help people do a lot of things in a lot of different areas. And there's lots of work that's been done over 25 years, right? So there's a cumulative effect. It can be daunting for somebody coming in for the first time to try and figure that out and find what they need and what's available to them. And that's why we put a lot of time and energy less than 2 years ago into combining a half dozen different websites with all that information into one. So everything has been relocated and repackaged on the new website, which is very simply propane.com. It is the home for the catalog of individual materials. It is the home for the learning center as well. And then just recently, in the last couple of months, we started a new tab in that website specifically for propane marketers, because the website is a resource not exclusively for marketers, right? The general public can use it if they're trying to learn about propane. So we added a tab specifically for propane marketers, titled for propane marketers. And in there, we're trying to house everything that is very specifically applicable to what they do in their business every day.
Obviously, so much has changed, over the past year with COVID. We've all done things differently. Maybe from your perspective, Pat, and PERC's perspective, how has COVID changed the industry, and what do you look for, from the industry in the coming months based on what's happened out there?
Certainly, no question. It's been a crazy year for everybody, and the propane marketers aren't excluded from that. I give the frontline folks so much credit because they were really pressed about dire circumstances with really cloudy future and how to move forward with it. And propane companies, by and large, embraced a variety of necessary changes in personnel safety, right? And the procedures that they use, they had to address somehow, because they have to balance customer needs for their service with public and employee safety. So, whether it's about, should a serviceman go into a house, right, where there may be some COVID exposure issues and concerns, different regulations in different communities, policies within individual companies that maybe couldn't be sustained during COVID. There was just a lot to deal with in a very short and immediate period of time, with no guarantees of right or wrong answers. We were kind of figuring it out as we went along, and kudos to the industry. They couldn't stop doing what they do, because that's fundamental, vital services that they provide every day to those customers, and they made it work, and they continue to make it work. So the way I look at it, the questions that were raised through all that are, so what did you learn by all that experience? It's been a year now, and you've done things differently. You've utilized more technology or different technology. You're monitoring tanks differently. You're making available online payments, your different rules on how techs are deployed in the field, whatever that may be. So how much of what you learn is eventually going to stick long term once we're no longer in the COVID situation? I don't know the answers to that. I think everybody's kind of asking those questions and wondering, so what does that mean? How's that going to play out? This will be interesting to see how all of that shakes out. I'm anxious to see that. Frankly, we're asking the same questions at PERC. What have we learned? We've had to switch the way we've done business as well. And what will be the lasting changes coming out of that experience? Wish I had the answers, but I'm planning on sticking around and seeing how it all plays out.
Very good, Pat. Looks like we're out of time. Is there anything else that you wanted to add here at the end, Pat?
Nothing specific. I just, want to emphasize that everything that we do at PERC, me in particular, and my other colleagues at PERC, we do for the benefit of the propane industry. So very much encourage you, if you have a need, have a question, have a concern, need to be pointed to a resource, need to have something explained to you, whatever it is, we very much encourage that. Phone calls, the website has a help desk portal. Spend a lot of time working with individual marketers to try to assist them in whatever their particular need is. And that door is always open, and we're always welcoming new folks to come and experience what we have available in their behalf.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Just a note that LPGas will be hosting our Growth Summit later this year. It's in September at Reunion Resort in Orlando, and one of Pat's colleagues, Steve Whaley, Director of Autogas Business Development, will be at the summit speaking about the autogas market. So we're looking forward to that. And if you'd like more information about the summit, go to lpgasmagazine.com and click on our Growth Summit tab. If you have any questions about that or this session, you can reach out to me, 216-706-3748, or email is brichesson@northcoastmedia.net. And for Pat and the Perk staff, like he mentioned, you can go to propane.com and the entire staff listing is located there. Thank you, everyone.